Alex, happy spring.
Yes, sir. The weather's not too bad outside. It's been nice and warm here in
Yep.
the Northeast lately. I'm not
Went
complaining about
fishing for
that.
the first time in like 4 years here. And it sucked. It sucked.
Yeah,
It sucked.
can't. That's why it's called fishing, not catching.
Well, the thing is, it wasn't even like I just was disgruntled with myself for not being able to catch anything. I was disgruntled because we were given improper information and went with the wrong equipment and couldn't really even fish. And when I did get the equipment, first cast flew it away and it's in a tree right now. But yeah,
Yeah,
besides the point,
you hate to see it.
I suck at fishing. Long
Well,
story
you
short.
also said you haven't done it in a few years, so take some practice.
Very true. But anyway, welcome back to Life the Complete Story. I am your host, Tyler, joined by my lovely co-host, Alex, and we are here to talk about frogs again. We have about 2 weeks left of frogs, this one and the next. And the way I broke it down is this one is going to have a heavier discussion on, I think there's less overall groups in this one, but they're bigger groups. Then the next group has like our stragglers of like 1 to 2 genus within the family. So with that being said, let's get into our nature in the news as we
Yes,
always
sir.
start.
Yes, sir. Today we found a article that was published by the Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, or CMS. It is titled "Freshwater Fish Populations Plunge 81% as River Migrations Collapse." So, as the headline suggests, this is going to be about a lot of the migratory fish throughout the world freshwater systems. This article kind of covers overall, there's 325 migratory freshwater fish species that have been identified as candidates for international conservation efforts. This article talks a lot about like the Amazon River Basin, which makes sense because it's the largest, one of the largest in the world, along with the Nile River Basin. But even with that, the major area uh, where these fish populations are under threat is actually in Asia. Of the 325, there are 205 species listed in Asia, and the rest being made up of South America, Africa, Europe, and North America. And with these, the biggest concern is obviously the loss of the species as a whole, but what that also does for the communities surrounding those areas, especially in some of those more headwater areas in places like South America or in Asia, where it's very remote. They're more like kind of in like South America, you get like native villages that have been there for centuries, or just those very small, kind of poorer communities that rely on these freshwater fish for an important food source. And with an 81% collapse, that's since 1970. That one shows a very important look into how bad the conservation efforts have been for that and managing these river systems, because they need to, the article is basically pushing for not treating them as separate waterways within each nation, but as massive collective systems that are connected to each other, which they are. Like the Nile River does not just flow in Egypt, or the Amazon does not just in Brazil. There's a major part of it in Brazil, but
Yeah, you need to treat the system as one because if it
yeah,
doesn't make sense for you to be, oh, well, we have protection for all these species in Brazil. But once you hit cross the border into like Paraguay, Uruguay, the other South American countries that are blanking right now,
yeah,
for them to just be free, like open season over there, it doesn't make much sense.
yeah,
So it's very important that these fish, especially these fish, have a um, protection countrywide.
yeah. And with this, a lot of these fish actually can travel pretty significant distances. The one they highlighted is the Dorado or gilded catfish. It is kind of a bottom-dwelling fish within the Amazon basin. They're fairly large. They can be up to 2 meters, is about 6.5 feet, and it is has the longest known freshwater migration, where its life cycle includes a journey of 11,000 kilometers from the headwaters in the Andes down to nursery areas along the coast.
Yeah, that's
Where
pretty much the entire width of South America.
yes, yes, it is. And these migratory fish, at least in the Amazon, uh, of 20 of these fish species that they looked at, they make up about 93% of the total fish landings. So what fish were caught. in those regional fisheries, which is an industry that is estimated to be about 436 million US dollars per year. So not only is there a lifestyle associated with these major migratory fish, but as well as a major economic factor as well. It's not just food for the locals. And one good quote from within the article is from the World Wildlife Fund in the United States, the vice president and deputy lead of freshwater shell theme. I believe I pronounced her. I'm not sure if I pronounced her last name
Sounds right.
correctly.
Looks right.
Close. But the quote is, "Rivers don't recognize borders, and neither do the fish that depend on them. The crisis unfolding beneath our waterways is far more severe than most people realize, and we are running out of time. Rivers need to be managed as connected systems with coordination across borders and investments in basin-wide solutions now before these migrations are lost forever." So within that, of course, as you're probably guessing, the major impacts on these fish are things like dams, because those interrupt waterways almost completely. Now, there are some that do have like fish ladders, or what they're called, or like kind of a small bypass stream that these fish are able to get up. So it helps a little bit, but it's not the same as the full width of the river. On top of that, you also get things like pollution, development, habitat change, because a lot of these rivers, things like sand that is mined actually for building material is freshwater sand. So it has a lot to do with the actual physical structure of the sand. So things like desert sand, a lot of people think, well, there's millions of tons of sand in the desert. Problem is that sand, because of the wind and the erosion that it's exposed to, is too round. So sand is used heavily in things like concrete and mortar, as those kind of building products. And mine, a lot of times they use is basically like a dredging system where it is dug out of the bottom of the river, which are the edges of the river systems, which not only changes those river systems, like the topography of it, but as well gets all that sediment and everything that's buried within it up into the water, kind of destroys the water quality.
Anything else, Alex?
That is
You covered
pretty
that
much.
really well.
Yeah, I tried to, but yeah, it's a major thing. It's not. It's a global problem. That 81% decline for these migratory fish since 1970 is one of the steepest drops recorded of the major vertebrate groups. So that is a major thing. As I said, that huge amount of not only the economic, but as well the regional food systems that these fish are involved in. Losing them would be a massive blow, both ecologically,
Economically.
economically, culturally. There's a lot of things that could go in that would be a problem if these fish are all lost. But that is all I have for this article. If you don't have anything else to
I
add,
have nothing.
Tyler,
You covered that spectacularly.
I tried my best. Well, then that will move us right on in to our regularly scheduled lesson for today. Tyler, kick us off with our frogs.
All right. So, like I said, we're covering frogs still. Only a couple groups today, about 4. Our first group is going to be Microhylidae. They're known as the narrow-mouth frogs. There's 600 geographically widespread members within 11 subfamilies. A molecular study done in 2007 suggests that the initial divergence of this family comes from the Cretaceous extinction, about 66, right after that Cretaceous extinction, actually, about 66 million years ago. There's relatively small frogs, rarely reaching over a half-inch in length, hence why you have that Microhylidae as their name, also narrow mouth. Most members are arboreal or terrestrial, with the terrestrial ground-dwelling species found under the leaf litter venturing out at night to hunt. They're either that typical frog shape, with the nice powerful legs, relatively roundish body, and head that's even with the body, or they have a more wide body with a narrow mouth, similar to some of the burrowing frogs we've seen before. They are found in the members in Oceania tend to bypass that tadpole stage, opting for a direct development from eggs into froglets. The members who do hatch tadpoles, however, their tadpoles typically lack teeth or any type of chewing system, which I think is unique, but that also typically means they don't have a very long tadpole stage, because Either it's vernal pools or something like that, where they lay their eggs to, and there's not enough time for them to really develop. The frogs, the more narrow body, narrow mouth body type, they tend to eat ants and termites as they're more of the terrestrial species, whereas the more typically shaped frogs have a diet that's more frog-like, insects, invertebrates, things of that nature. Alex, what's our next group for the day?
Yes, sir. Our next group
Wait,
is
before we go on, I should probably give you the genera names. So there's subfamily Adelastinae that has the genus Adelastus. There's a subfamily Asterophyrinae, which has a bunch of genera in them. The subfamily Chaperinae has one genus Chaperina. Cophilinae has a few genera. Discophinae has one. Gastrophyrinae has a few. Hoplophrinae has a couple. Calophrinae has one. Melanobatrachinae has one genera. The subfamily Microhylidae has a couple. There's the subfamily Otophrinae, Phyronemerinae, and Escaphiophyrenae. That's all I have. Moving on to the next one.
So our next is the family Myobatrachidae. These are the Australian ground frogs or Australian water frogs. As you probably guessed, they are native to Australia as well as New Guinea, varying in sizes from the relatively small ½ inch all the way up to just under 5 inches, so a very wide range of sizes. They do not have any arboreal members. They are all terrestrial or contained 2 gastric brooding frogs, so they actually brooded their tadpoles and their eggs and tadpoles kind of within the stomach. But unfortunately, these 2 frog species are extinct. Many species are adapted to burrow because in Australia and New Guinea, they do have some semi-arid climate, so it gets fairly dry part of the year, and some of the members actually lay their eggs on moist sand several feet below the surface, and then they then hatch directly into froglets rather than having tadpoles. Because none of them are arboreal, they lack adhesive pads on the fingers and toes, and they are divided into subfamilies based on their egg-laying habits. One group, Limnodynastinae, they actually lay foam nests, while the group Rheobatrachinae contains the gastric brooders, and all the others are in Myobatrachinae. And within this, there are a handful of genera, starting with the genus Ansticia. There are 4 species. These are the western ground froglets, which I believe is what I have a picture of. I do not, sorry, this is a later genus. The genus Rhinophrinae has 2 species, the Australian dumpy frogs. The genus Assa has 2 species, the pouched frogs. The genus Crinia, which is one of the frogs, this is the frog that I have pictured here, has the Australian froglets. There are 17 species. This is the second largest. The genus Geocrinia has 3. These are the ground froglets. There's a monospecific genus Metacrinia. This is the Nichols toadlet. The genus Mixophies has 9 species. These are the barred frogs. There's a couple monospecific genus. Myobatrachus is the turtle frog, and Paracrinia is the Haswell's frog. The genus Pseudophrinae is the crowned toadlet. 2 gastric brooding frogs that are extinct were in the genus Rheobatrachus. A monospecific genus Spicospina has the sunset frog. The genus Todactylus has 6 species. There's the Australian torrent frogs, and the last genus, Orolea, is the largest genus. These are the Australian toadlets. There are 29 species.
Take us to our next group, one of our larger groups in frogs in general. This is going to be Ranoidea. These are the true frogs. They have the widest distribution of any frog family, and most abundant, occurring within all continents except for Antarctica, as most amphibians are. It's too cold for them there. They have that typical smooth, moist skin that you think of when you think of a frog, with those large, powerful legs used for jumping, and extensively webbed feet, range from small to large. I wasn't given actual measurements, but small to bullfrog.
So the American bullfrog is one of the larger ones.
Yes. They are aquatic to or they're either aquatic or terrestrial, but the terrestrial ones tend to live relatively close to water, and they lay their eggs in water with the tadpole stage. And they contain some arboreal species and some of the few amphibians able to tolerate brackish water. They are dispersed out of Asia in the at the beginning of the Miocene, colonizing every continent except for uh, uh, Antarctica. And your members here are, bear with me now, we got a handful here: Abaverona, Amnirana, Amelopes, Babina, Chalcorona, Clinotarsus, Glandirana, Huaya, Humerana, Hydrophilix, Hylarana, Indosilverana, Lithobates, which is the genera that has a lot of the North American frogs that we're familiar with, where we're from. Merisogenus, Netagrana, Odorana, Paparana, Philophylax, Pseudorana, Pterorana, Pulcherana, Rana, Sangarana, Storos, Sumatrana, Silverana, and Wajarana. And that'll bring us to our final group of the day, Alex. We're flying through this.
I know. So our last group of the day is the family Rhacophoridae. These are the scrub frogs. Let me get up a picture here. Oh, this will be a good picture. Nice, nice diverse one. Zoom her in a little bit. So the shrub frogs, these are native to sub-Saharan Africa, South India, Sri Lanka, Japan, and China. They are predominantly arboreal with a couple of terrestrial members. This group includes what are known as the flying frogs, which they do not actually fly. This is the bottom right picture is a flying frog. You can see they're similar to flying squirrels, where they actually they have very extensively webbed feet and they have very long fingers. So what they'll do is they'll actually spread their fingers and toes out very wide and flat and kind of use that to catch air as they fall and glide. So they don't actually fly, they glide. The mating frogs do go through amplexus, and they will actually beat their legs together to create a foam to lay their eggs in. And they vary in size from about 0.6 inches to just under 5 inches. These diverged during the Paleocene, but there are some studies that estimated a Cretaceous divergence. So there's a couple different hypotheses on how they dispersed. Believe they have actually kind of the long distance dispersal. They actually used India as a bit of a stepping stone when India and Africa were very close together, or closer together than they are now. I think so. That is, I'll go through the genera now. So there are two subfamilies. The first subfamily, Burgurinae, has one genus is Burguria. And then the next subfamily, Rhacophorinae, has the remaining subfamilies, or genus, sorry. Starting with Betomyxalis, Curazalis, Curamantis, Phaehyla, Gotizalis, Gracizalis, Curazalis, Leptomantis, Luizalis, Mercurana, Nasutizalis, Nyctizalis, Philatus, Polypedates, Pseudophylatus, Rheochestes, Rhacophorus, Rohanazalis, Taruga, Theloderma, Vampirius, and Zangazalis. That is all of the genera.
All right.
Family.
That's all of our lesson for the day. We have 1 week left of frogs. and then we'll slowly, surely get out of amphibians. But we're not done. We obviously still have our regularly recurring segments. Our first one for today is going to be our amazing species. Today we are talking about the Amami Oshima frog from the genus Odorrana. These guys are found on a southern island of Japan, which I believe is called Amami. Or Amami Oshima, I believe, is the island. I don't know much about Japanese geography.
It believes, yeah, Amami Oshima Island, which is off of kind of in the archipelago that is off of the southern tip of Japan. So, I mean, this little orange dot, so you can see mainland Japan, this island right here.
And these guys are labeled as endangered by the IUCN, most recently assessed in 2020, published in 2021. Both because of the ongoing decline in extent of occurrence as well as area of occupancy. The extent of occurrence is 893 kilometers squared, while the area of occupancy is about 436 kilometers squared. That one island is, Amami Oshima in the Ryukyu archipelago, as Alex said, occurs from sea level to 694 meters above sea level. It has a stable population, luckily, but it's believed to have been in decline due to reduction of its habitat and breeding ground. But as of 2006, is starting to recover as a result of the eradication of the invasive mongoose. But we're still kind of waiting for the breeding sites to recover in full. The couple threats it has are roads and railroads, dams and water management. Gets caught in traps sometimes, as well as invasive species. I'm assuming that over or punked would be the mongoose.
What are you looking for?
Yeah, okay. The threat. Oh, I lost my tab now. Sweet. Yeah, Urva or punctata, which is the mongoose, the invasive mongoose. They are collected for the wild pet trade in Japan and the US. There is no breeding of captive individuals. It is all collected from the wild to be used in trade. As I start to unfocus out of frame and the baby is crying. There is a monitoring scheme, but there is no action recovery plan. With no conservation sites identified, however, there are different types of land management. I have nothing else to add, Alex. We'll kick it on over to you for your most wanted for the week.
Yes, sir. So my most wanted for this week, I pulled a tree, one that Tyler and I are somewhat familiar with, as it is more or less native to our area. It is the honey locust.
When I saw you type this in, I didn't think you were referring to a tree. I thought you were talking about a bug.
No, it is the honey locust. That is Gleditsia triacanthos, also known as the thorny locust or thorny honey locust. It is a deciduous tree from the Fabaceae family, so this is the pea family, kind of native to central North America, mostly found in moist river valleys, but they are very highly adaptable to different environments, and it has been introduced worldwide. It is outside of its natural range. It can be an aggressive and damaging invasive species, which is why we are talking about it today. Kind of, like I said, kind of native to the Ohio and lower Mississippi River Valley. So kind of the eastern Midwest through the south. They're fairly large and longer lived trees, so they can reach about 20 to 30 meters in height or just about 100 feet. They are relatively fast growing but live a moderate lifespan. About 125 years is a fairly average. They have small kind of greenish yellow leaves, and they will get small greenish yellow to greenish white flowers. And the thorns are kind of a big identifying factor of them. They can get up to 10 centimeters or 4 inches long on the on the branches, and on the trunk they can even get as large as 20 centimeters or 8 inches. And they can be singular as well as kind of clustered branch, which is there's one kind of sort of a subspecies that is known as the starburst honey locust, because from the trunk it looks like an explosion of thorns in the clusters. So with it, the being invasive, notes here is kind of one of the most successful tree shrubs within the pea family, that Fabaceae family, and invading new habitats worldwide. It's considered a major environmental and economic weed in Australia, as well as other places like Argentina, where the plants they'll grow very tightly, forming very dense thickets, and they can actually destroy pasture areas as well that the livestock survive in. These thickets will choke out waterways, preventing domestic as well as native animals from drinking in the waterways, and they're also known to harbor vermin, so like rats, mice, things like that. And the spines are very damaging to people, wildlife, and even they're strong enough to even puncture the tires of vehicles. In Argentina, they were introduced in the early 1800s as an ornamental, and has since escaped and invaded the native grasslands, where it's kind of turning them into forests. And because it grows so fast, it actually out competes grasses and other crops. With that, it kind of overtakes those farm fields and those open field areas, and turns them more into forest, kind of changing the habitat over time. As I said, they do get relatively large. The largest being in the the American National Register of Champion Trees. It's in the state of Virginia, so the east coast of the United States. This tree, it has a diameter at breast height of 2 meters or 6.5 feet, and is 31 meters tall, or about 103 feet. So they can get very large, and they're very tolerant of urban population. So it causes problems as far as the invasiveness as well, because they can tolerate salt spray, compacted soils, poor aeration, constrained planted areas, pollution. So thus it has been widely planted in cities. Is also very tolerant of dry conditions, as well as different alkaline or acidic soils. And you see it a lot in North America because it has been the replacement for the elm trees that were grown in cities that were killed by the Dutch elm disease. But
Anything else out?
that is all I have for them. And other than being really good timber trees, because it is a very hard tree that does not rot very quickly, like in North America, using the fallen branches, a lot of old farms used locust wood for like fence posts. But it's really, the pods are edible, at least from this tree, so they are consumed by wildlife and livestock. But as I said, they grow very quickly, and they're very tolerant of a lot of different areas. So they can kind of take over, but not always. And the other thing with this being a part of the pea family, the legumes, it is thought that typically members of that family are actually, through symbiotic bacteria in their root systems, will actually fix nitrogen into the soil. So take nitrogen out of the air and put it into the usable form in the soil. But it is kind of disputed if the honey locust does that or not. Kind of not sure if it's good in that sense or not.
Gotcha. Well, kick us back over to me, as Alex is currently dying. From the vault. So today's from the vault is a little bit different. Talking about Prismantis Ruatus, which is a frog species that went extinct not too long ago. It was only discovered in 1922. And the original description wasn't published until 1979. However, after being published, it was unable to be found. But what makes this guy so cool is in 2022, at the University of San Francisco in Quito Sanchez Nubicela, which is a state in I believe, Ecuador, I believe it is. They were able to rediscover this frog on an expedition. They didn't believe it, even though it like matched perfectly from what the description originally said back in the 70s. Rough skin, some bumps, the W-shaped ridge on the back, which you can kind of see in the image that Alex has, the lack of eardrums, and they even did a DNA analysis on the two females that they found, comparing it to the 35 other specimens that they had in the gene bank. They noticed that this never the other specimens that were of other Prismantis species didn't match, so this had to be the Prismantis Ruatus. So this is kind of a happy story because we found one species after 50 years of not being found. So the fact that we might be able to find more of these rare amphibian species after chytrid and a whole bunch of other nastiness of pollution and human development took them all out. It gives me hope. But I don't know about you, Alex, but it fills me with some joy.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool to see a species come back from the dead.
Yeah, Lazarus species. We'll talk about them in
Yeah.
maybe in another episode. Because it's time for us to talk about today's ecology encyclopedia.
Yes.
We started our talk last week on cellular respiration. We kind of went over, I believe, glycolysis, which is the first step of cellular respiration. Now we're talking about the actual meat and taters.
Yes. So we kind of talked about glycolysis and fermentation, which is the glycolysis is the first step, and then fermentation is without oxygen. So today we're starting into the aerobic respiration or with oxygen. We're going to break this up into two chunks just because it is pretty hefty. So we're going to start today with the next step in aerobic respiration, and that is the Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle. So what this does is this happens within the mitochondria. So within your karyotic cells, this is the organelle that is primarily responsible for energy production. And so with this, the pyruvate that you get at the end of glycolysis, that three carbon sugar that's left over, it then starts to enter into the mitochondria and starts into this cycle where it is attached CoA. I forget what the CoA stands for. So it's a coenzyme. A is what it is in acetyl CoA. So what that coenzyme does is it attaches to that, creating acetyl CoA, and from there it enters the citric acid cycle. This is where, when you think of aerobic respiration, where you put oxygen in and you get carbon dioxide out, this is kind of where a lot of that happens. So you can see just as soon as it goes in, you lose a carbon dioxide. And through this whole cycle, the main part of this is to create those electron carrier compounds like NADH, FADH, which will help in the next step, which is where the majority of the ATP is made in aerobic respiration. So you go through this whole cycle, you get a lot of changes to the actual molecule itself. I can pull it up. It's going to be a disaster for those of you who do not really know chemistry. It'll be very confusing. For those who do know chemistry, you'll kind of enjoy it just to look at it. But it's beefy. I need to zoom it way out. So you start with your pyruvate, this 3 carbon, and then your acetyl CoA comes together and you get these 6 carbon chains, and you see as it goes through kind of the different changes in the chemical structure over time, and through these changes is where you get the electrons for the electron transport chain. They are lost during the changing of the bonds within these different molecules, and then by the time you get to the end, you wind up with a molecule, this oxaloacetate, which is then using the CoA or the acetyl CoA, you can get back to the citrate, and then the cycle starts over again. So you can see in this, you do make one ATP out of this, as well as a GTP, which is using a different nucleotide base to make that triphosphate, not as heavily used as the ATP within the system. But through this, these make all of these electron carriers, which will then when we wrap up next week, you'll see where all of those come in the next step, which is the electron transport chain. But I'm not going to get into the weeds into the actual chemical changes that occur, because we'll be here all day, and I'm just going to bore you all to death with all of that chemistry. But this is that next part. The prime part of this is to make those electron transport carriers, which are used in the next step, which is the final step, where the bulk of the ATP is made in cellular respiration. But Tyler, anything you have to add?
I do not. This was a great episode. Good talk, very detailed, very information heavy, which is, we need that every once in a while. A lot of time we get kind of like fly through, bang, 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 have a lot of stuff to cover, not really going in depth on a whole bunch of stuff. But I feel like we covered it pretty well today. I've been Tyler, that's been Alex, and Alex, how do we end him?
Before we do, remember social medias, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts, we're there. Facebook,
TikToks,
Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Life the Complete Story, or at Life the Complete Story. Send us an email if you have any longer questions you can't put into like a comment at lifecompletestory. Now, at the end of every episode, we always say, keep on learning, learn something new. You'll never know what you find interesting. But I've been Alex, that has been Tyler, and we will see you on the next episode.